Hello, today we're doing lesson 9.4, ellipses. An ellipse is a set of all points P in a plane such that the sum of the distances between P and two fixed points, called the foci, is a constant. A line through the foci intersects the ellipse at the two vertices. The major axis joins the vertices. Its midpoint is the ellipse's center. The line perpendicular to the major axis at the center intersects the ellipse at the two co-vertices, which are joined by what we call the minor axis. So here's two great pictures, one of a horizontal ellipse and one of a vertical ellipse. So the horizontal ellipse, we have this would be considered the major axis, this would be the minor axis. The vertices are at negative and positive a, comma 0. The co-vertices are at 0, positive and negative b. What you need to memorize is an ellipse with a horizontal major axis looks like this. X squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared equals 1. The ellipse with the vertical major axis, so this one is the major, this one is the minor, is x squared over b squared plus y squared over a squared equals 1. So I want you to notice the difference in the two equations. The only thing that is different is where the a and b is. So in a horizontal ellipse, the a squared, which is considered the vertices, is under the x. So that makes sense because x-axis is the horizontal axis, so that's where the vertices would be. This one, the a squared, which is the vertices, are under the y. So it's how we're going to be able to recognize it. Basically, the bigger number is the bigger number under the x or under the y, and that's going to tell us whether it's horizontal or vertical. So a is always the greater number. If a is under x, it's a horizontal. This is what I just said. So you can go ahead, circle, highlight, whatever you need to do there with that. Now, some other information is I already talked about if the bigger number is under the x squared, it's horizontal. The vertices are going to be on the x-axis. It's going to be plus or minus a, comma 0. The co-vertices, which is on the minor axis, is going to be the opposite, 0 plus or minus b. So when we have a vertical ellipse, the bigger number's under the y, so that means our vertices are 0 plus or minus the number, and then the co-vertices would be plus or minus a number, comma 0. And we'll talk more about this. Okay, the major axis and minor axes are of lengths 2a and 2b respectively, where a is greater than b, b is greater than 0. The foci of the ellipse lie on the major axis at a distance of c units from the center. So there's an equation for what we call the foci. C squared equals a squared minus b squared. All of this information on this front page we're going to refer back to as we do two different types of problems dealing with ellipses. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, when I look at this first equation, I see that the bigger number is under x. That means my ellipse is going to be horizontal. So I'm just going to highlight the x-axis so I know that. So to get a and b, we're going to square root each of these numbers. So a is going to be plus or minus 12, and b is going to be plus or minus 8. Now, how do we write our vertices and co-vertices? Because it's horizontal, that means our points are going to be on the x-axis. So how would you label these points at positive and negative 12? This would be 11, this would be 12. How would you name these 2 points that I just marked on my graph? Well, you would name them as 12, comma 0 and negative 12, comma 0. I don't mind if you write it like this, or some people will write it as 1 point. You'll probably see me do it in the next video as this. So this means I have 2 points. I have positive 12, 0, and I have negative 12, 0. So either way, I'll accept either one. Same thing with the co-vertices. So if my vertices are on the x-axis, my co-vertices must be on the y-axis at positive 8 and negative 8. So when I write the co-vertices, you're writing points on the y-axis, so the 0 must come first. So you can write it as 0, 8, 0, negative 8, or we can write it as 0 plus or minus 8. Okay, so that's enough information to go ahead and draw my ellipse in. This is not going to be too neat. I know it's messy. It's the best I could do. There we go. Okay, now the foci, we have to do a little equation to find that. I would write the equation every time you calculate it so that you memorize it and get stuck in your head. So c squared equals a squared minus b squared. I have a squared. Don't recalculate it. Okay, it's 144. I have b squared. It's 64. So c squared is going to be the difference between these two, which is 80. I don't want c squared though, I actually want c, so I'm going to square root both sides. I would like you to reduce the radical, and the foci is going to be the same, the number is going to be the same position as it is for the vertices. So we are going to have plus or minus 4 root 5 comma 0. Okay, so sometimes what I'll do, and I'll show you on the next one, is I'll go ahead and fill in where the zeros go for each one of these once I decide if the ellipse is vertical or horizontal. Okay, let's go ahead and try the next problem. Okay, now this one's a little bit different because it doesn't equal 1. We need to get it to equal 1. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and divide everything by 144. That's going to get my 1 to be over on the right side. So 16 goes into 144 9 times, so I have x squared over 9 plus y squared over 16 equals 1. Now this one, the bigger number's underneath the y. That means I'm going to have a vertical ellipse. When I do that, I know that I'm going to have 0 first, then the number. The co-vertices are going to be the opposite. It's going to be the number and then 0. And the foci is going to be the same as the vertices, so 0 in number. So that's what I was talking about in the problem before. This kind of helps determine what numbers go where. Okay, so we square root the bigger number to get our a. So a is plus or minus 4. So I'm going to put plus or minus 4 in here. And I'm going to go ahead and mark 4 and negative 4 on my graph. Square root 9 to get b, so b is going to be plus or minus 3. So I'm going to fill in plus or minus 3 here, and I'm going to go ahead and mark negative 3 and positive 3 on my graph. I can go ahead and draw my ellipse in, and now I'm going to calculate the foci. So c squared equals a squared minus b squared. We plug in 16 minus 9. That's going to give us, what, 7. Square root both sides, so you get plus or minus square root of 7. So not so bad. I want you to go ahead, pause the video, try the U-try on your own. I'll give you a hint on the U-try. When you look at the U-try, I want you to recognize that the bigger number is under the y, so this is a vertical ellipse. Okay, go ahead, try that, and come back to the video and we'll try the next type of problem. Okay, welcome back. The next type of problem is we're writing equations of the ellipse. So this time you have to understand what you need and what you're given. So the equation for an ellipse is x squared plus y squared over a number equals 1. Now you need to recognize, do we have a vertical or horizontal ellipse? Well, if the vertex is at 0, 8, that means the other one must be at 0, negative 8. So this is a vertical ellipse. So that means my a must be under my y. So I'm going to go ahead and write this. Now this problem's easy because you're given a and you're given b. We don't need to find anything. We just plug these in and we're done. So my answer is x squared over 3 squared, which is 9, plus y squared over 8 squared, which is 64, equals 1. Done. Okay, now the next problem gets a little trickier because the next problem we're given a vertex and a focus, so we don't have b. Okay, first let's take a look. The vertex is at negative 8, 0. That would be here, and then positive 8, 0. So that's a horizontal ellipse. So that means I need to write this equation down. The a is going to be underneath the x because it's horizontal. Now in this problem, you're given the a and you're given the focus. You're given c. So we're going to need to use our foci formula equation to get b. So if I plug in c, I get 16. I plug in a, I get 64. Go ahead, solve for b. Subtract 64 from both sides. So we get negative 48 equals negative b squared. I don't want it negative, so I'm going to multiply both sides by a negative 1. Now the good news is on this problem, you don't need to calculate b because we're plugging in b squared. So why square root it just to square it again? Just take b squared and plug it in. So my answer to this equation is x squared over our a, which is 64, because I'm squaring negative 8, plus y over 48 equals 1. Okay? Okay, let's go ahead and try the last problem together, and then I'll let you try the U-try on your own. Okay, now this problem you weren't given the vertex, you're given the co-vertex and the focus. Well, the vertex is going to be in the same position as the focus, so if the focus is 0, 10, the vertices must be there too, so it's a vertical ellipse. So I'm going to go ahead and write my vertical equation down, which means the bigger number's under the y. Okay, I'm given B and I'm given C, which means I need to find A. So you're going to use this formula, plug in what you know to find A. So C is 10, so 10 squared is 100, minus 2 root 11 squared. So we're squaring the 2, which is 4. We're squaring the root 11, which is 11, so I get 44. So I'm going to go ahead and add 44 to both sides, so I get 144 equals A squared. I plug this in for this, and my B, I plug in 44 because I need to take 2 root 11 and square it. So my answer in this problem is x squared over 44 plus y squared over 144 equals 1. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the U-try. I want you to pause the video, try the U-try on your own. What you need to know today is we go back to the front page, you need to know this information. You need to know the horizontal ellipse, the vertical ellipse. You need to know how we recognize if it's horizontal or vertical, so the bigger number would be under the corresponding axis, so the x-axis or the y-axis, and you need to know the equation for the foci. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and write it at the bottom of the paper, and I will see you tomorrow.